through some of the examples of lessons from our actual classrooms where teachers are using Google Apps for education as one of the tools in the instructional methodology. The school district that I'm at is Maine Township District 207, which is in Park Ridge, Illinois. You can see in the bottom corner here O'Hare Airport, so we're in close proximity to O'Hare. We have 3 large high schools, and we've been in this area for a very long time. One of our buildings, Maine East High School, was built in 1929, so we are longtime members of our community. Our mission in our district that we go by is to improve learning, and that's easy to see when you take a look at our 1,500 staff members. Our administrators are all very progressive educators, doing whatever it takes to make a difference in each child's learning experience, which is part of the reason we've moved towards Google Docs. It gives us a whole new set, or Google Apps and Google Docs, gives us a whole new set of tools to use in our classroom. Google Apps for Education is a whole suite of tools that Google gives away to schools for free. We're using all of these tools in various ways throughout our schools. Today's instructional examples will be some high school lessons. We are 3 large high school buildings. That's what makes up most of the district. Although many of the lessons you're going to see today could be scaled to a different grade level. Really, you're going to see some different instructional strategies, and that's going to be the focus of today's webinar, is actual instructional examples. Some of these will be replacement type technologies where you just took a lesson and you replaced what you would have done in the classroom before with the technology, and some of it is transformative type lessons that without the technology being there, there's no way you could have done the lesson like this. But either way, the focus today will be on instruction. We're going to go through many of the different tools that Google Apps EDU uses, though, to support those instructional examples. A lot of them center around docs, which includes, for today's example, spreadsheet, forms, documents, presentations. You're going to see an example of a teacher using the Google site that integrates chat into that site. I'm going to show you a little bit about video that we've used in the classroom, and then all of this hinges on Gmail. The fact that all of our students and teachers have Gmail accounts and can communicate that way and share that way. If you're interested in learning more about Google Apps for Education, go to that link at the bottom, google.com/a/edu, and you'll be able to get all the information you need about these products. The focus today, though, is to go beyond the tools and to get into the instruction. What you're going to see today is a lot of examples that are not centered around content, but are centered around problem-based or project-based learning examples. We use a lot of cooperative learning in our schools. We like to think of ourselves as leaders in cooperative learning, and we've spent a lot of time doing staff development on that. So you're going to see those types of themes working their way through these lessons today. As we do these, technology will be a tool in accomplishing the goal. The tool is not the focus of these instructional lessons. It's just a means to the goal. And you're going to see students using technology in very powerful ways as they try to accomplish the goals of the lessons. It's not drill and kill type of activities you're going to see. You're going to see the technology being integrated into solving the goals and meeting the instructional goals of the lesson. The first one of these is a problem-based learning activity done in a marketing class at Maine East. This was developed by a team of teachers, but was shared with me by John Schwan, who is a business teacher at Maine East High School. And the marketing class set out to solve the problem, well, actually to find a problem and then solve it. So their idea was to contact the coaches at Maine East and say, is there something the marketing class can do for you? And what happened was we had the head soccer coach reach out and say to the marketing team, yeah, I'd like for you to help market our team and to help me solve a problem. See, the problem is that Maine East High School has one of the top 10 soccer programs in the state of Illinois. However, they weren't really drawing a lot of people to the games. This is what the stands kind of looked like when a game was going on. So Coach DePrizzo said, hey, find out for me why attendance is so low and see if you can get some more kids there. So the marketing class put together a whole research program to go out and find out why aren't kids going to the soccer game. And they gathered a whole bunch of information. They used Google Forms as really the backbone of gathering that data, sent out through email to students and staff at Maine East High School. And they gathered all of that data back through Forms, and Forms dumps all of that into a spreadsheet where you can see some of the data results here from what they were gathering. So they gathered all of this data about Maine East soccer, and they found out, yeah, we all know it's a good team, but the experience isn't what we want it to be to attend a game. So the marketing class formed a marketing team and put together a marketing plan, and they created this plan for Soccer Fest to try to get people to turn out to a soccer game against one of the other local high schools, and they put together a whole promotional plan which involved a lot of material around the school, some radio spots on our school's radio station, and they put together a video that was then put on YouTube. We used YouTube at the time because Google Video wasn't part of Google Apps EDU at that point. However, now it is. Google Video is part of the Apps EDU platform, and we could have put it in there at this point. So they produced this YouTube video, they put it out there, they do the whole marketing push to get people out to the game, and we have over 750 students turn out to cheer on their soccer team. We had a packed house that night, we raised a bunch of money for charity at the same time, and the team won, as they usually do. So that's an example of finding an authentic problem, using tools to gather information about that. You need those collaborative tools to do it in that way. And then using the information that they gathered to go out and solve an authentic problem. We're going to slide over elsewhere in the building, over to the science department. Aida Awad is the Maine East Science Department chair, and she did an activity on soils called the Real Farmville. A pretty traditional science lesson where you're going to take different crops and different types of soils and try to determine what types of crops grow best in different types of soils. She has several instructional goals, as you can see spelled out there, many of them centering around science, not necessarily technology. The technology is a tool to reach the goal of this science lesson. It really is an analysis of soils and pH of soils and what types of crops grow best in those types of soils. So they went out, here's also take a look at some of the net standards, the technology standards that correlate with those instructional goals. We're going to do this a couple of times through the webinar today, so you can see we're meeting both instructional goals. And yes, there are technology goals that are met just because of the tools we're using to accomplish the goals of the lesson. Here's some of our students actually gathering data on the experiments. You can see we do have several netbooks floating around our schools for these types of activities. They work real well with these cloud-based applications. So here's students actually analyzing the soil, getting ready to start growing their crops in those different soils. So what they did was they used a form to dump data into a spreadsheet. I'm going to hop out here and show you this spreadsheet in a second. You can see we have many different lab groups turning in data from several different days about different types of crops and soils. Pretty typical science experiment, except the fact that they're collaborating across classrooms and across lab groups to get all of this information in here, and you can see there's lots of data. And typically, analyzing a set of data like this is quite difficult to sort through and use. But there's this cool feature in Google Spreadsheets. If you go under Insert Gadget, you get a whole bunch of different types of interactive charts and graphs that you can implement in this. And one of the ones that they used, I have embedded down here on the page, they used what's called a motion chart, which allows you to look at several different variables at one time on a screen. So the types of experiments they did was they're gathering lots of data: pH, soil type, type of plant, pH, height of the plant, number of leaves. So to start comparing many different data sets on one graph, they use this motion chart, where you can take, let's look at the height of the plant over time. We're going to make each different crop a different color. So beans are blue, corn is green, tomatoes yellow. And then we're going to say, hey, let's take a look at the number of leaves on each plant. So the bigger the circle down here, the more leaves there were. We're going to take a couple of these. I'm just going to randomly pick a couple of groups here to look at. I'm not sure what their data will be here. So we can pull out and highlight those two different groups. We're going to watch what happens to those data sets over time. Well, I picked, again, one with not a lot of data there, so let's pick one that I see has some. Back it up and watch it change over time. So we're comparing corn and beans over time and seeing what happens there. So you can see very powerful data analysis tools using visual literacy strategies to look at complex data in a visual format, which helps the students understand this much better than looking at just a big table of data. If we go back, I'll show you the actual analysis they did. So here's two lab groups that were comparing with one another, and they took a look at what happened to their different crops over a period of time. So here's what the students thought about the overall activity. So you can see that they're feeling that this type of an activity helps them understand the concept greater. You can see that some of the instructional goals are met by their statements there. And then the tool itself, you can see that students felt that the tool helped them accomplish those instructional goals, just by the ability for them to gather the information, then share it, edit it, compare it. We're going to go into over to Maine West High School down the road and take a look at another business class that used these tools. And what they were doing in this class was trying to simulate what it's like to try to work asynchronously and not face-to-face. They were discussing in business today, it's very common for people to be working on projects together but never meet up. So they simulated that by putting together a project for a business class where they took students and randomly assigned them to each other across two different classes that never meet at the same time. So these partners would never meet face-to-face. They would have to do everything collaboratively online, and what the goal of this was to run some kind of survey of their peers, analyze the data, and create a presentation, and then present it to their class. Each student would give the same presentation to their individual class without the two of them ever sitting down at the same table and working on the project. A lot of the goals of this activity were to learn to collaborate some of this asynchronous conversation, be able to work online, and to build a product to represent their results. You can see some more of the net standards around this activity, mostly around communication and collaboration, and about processing data, reporting, those kinds of things. So what the students did was they worked together on a document to come up with the questions that they wanted to be in a form. And then they made forms that worked as surveys within Google Apps, and then used our internal email system to circulate these to our students. We provide an address book in Google Contacts so that students can find their peers and their addresses within the school. And then they selected certain peers to fill this out. They selected some students, some teachers. I got a couple of them depending on what they were surveying. And they gathered all of that data back, because the form dumps it nicely into spreadsheets. And then they took the data that they gathered and created a presentation. So here's a slide from a Google presentation that they created. They created it online. Once again, never saw each other face to face, did all their collaboration that way. And they built out a presentation that they brought back into the classroom and presented to the class. Part of their presentation was to reflect on the experience, because this was an activity that was built to show the challenges of communicating this way, the tools it takes to communicate this way, as well as gathering the data and presenting it and creating the presentation, and then the presentation to their class. You can see that their experiences are very similar to the adult experiences working this way, about how communication can be difficult, and when you're not sitting across from one another, it's hard to decide who's going to divvy up the work and those kinds of things. So a lot of the experiences that the teacher expected from the beginning, the students had, and they had a kind of an authentic experience there that matches up what's going on in the business world today. I'm going to go over to Maine South High School, and Maine South High School is, all of our schools participate in the Chicago Metro History Fair, which is similar to a science fair, but it's built around the idea of investigating some Chicago history and presenting on it. Mike Biondo is one of our social science teachers here at Maine South, and he really puts together the materials for Maine South High School to work on this project. The National History Day competition is a national competition. The Chicago competition is our local division of that. What they do is they research some part of Chicago history, and then they need to put together an actual project that represents their research and their discoveries. So it's a performance/project-based activity. What they produce could be very, very different. Some will make a triboard presentation, some will make models, some will do live performances, others will have papers or videos. It's a huge variety of what they can choose from to present their research. The overall goal for this lesson is looking at a change in historical time, networking with other students that work collaboratively in groups, once again for this activity, to make a product that supports their analysis and theses of that change in time. And ultimately, they're presenting it to a judge. Whole lot of net standards there. The last one didn't even fit on the page. So this is a pretty broad activity, and it's a long activity. It's big, and a lot of instructional goals and net standards are met in the process of creating the product. Because it's so long, so large, so many students are involved in it, and a lot of what the students are doing is outside of class on this project. Mr. Biondo put together a Google site, which is just kind of a website just for this project. All of the materials that students need to complete this are contained within the site, including exemplars from past projects, ways for kids to collaborate with each other, and he also has a chat on the site so that if it's outside of school hours and they need to ask a question, they can chat in and talk to Mr. Biondo and ask him a question real quick and get back to what they're working on. Here's some of the highlights from last year. We had several local celebrities or college professors in to judge. You can see lots of people eventually go out and compete with one another. And here's some examples of the types of projects that are realized in this activity. This is a model of Midway, which is down on the south side of Chicago. This isn't there any longer. It used to be a big fairground, so they put together what it looked like back in its heyday and reconstructed the Midway. And other students turn in triboards or, like I said, videos. Here's some more examples of the type of products that are created. And these all go on display initially within our school libraries, and then they can advance beyond that. Here's some student reflections on the actual tools that they use to complete this project. You can see it's important to these students that they can go find the information when they need to. There's not always going to be time during the school day when they're working on this, so they need a way to collaborate outside of school, to ask for help, and to get help when they need it. So that site is essential for students working on this project. So I've highlighted for you a couple of specific teacher examples. We're seeing lots more than this. We don't have, weeks to walk through them all. This is just a couple of teachers that we picked to show off activities. But there's many other activities going on across the building. A lot of student journaling through either Google Docs or through email. You saw some of the examples of collaboration and communication that are going on, but there's lots more than that. What we're seeing is the school day kind of being extended. Students are able to go home and stay in touch with each other. They're able to gather data during a class and then go home and analyze it, collaborate with it, share with it. So the school day isn't necessarily ending when the bell rings. We're starting to delve into the idea of students building portfolios over a long period of time, because all of their work can be kept in Google Apps. They can even upload files to it now. All of our students have 1 gigabyte of storage space through Google. So if they have photos or those kinds of things, they can upload them into their portfolio and then share them out. Other products that are in the Google family but aren't necessarily in Google Apps, we're also seeing people naturally connect to those. Like Google Earth is a very popular program that's used here. In geology and geography classes, we do a lot of graphical information system work with those things. We use higher-end applications at the high school level for those, but we're seeing students get started on the Google Earth tools and then advance to some of the My World products or the ArcGIS products or those kinds of things. In English classrooms, we're seeing a lot of teachers take advantage of the Google Lit Trips, which are a pretty cool integration of literacy with Google Earth. And then in our career and technical education programs, we use AutoCAD programs, but once again, we're also using Google SketchUp as another way that kids can go home and work on much of the same concepts with a free tool. The virtual museum link there that you see goes with the box at the bottom of the page. A couple of years ago, Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago put together a contest to design their next exhibit, and one of our teachers, Mr. Swistak over at Maine West, a science teacher, had 2 classrooms build virtual museum exhibits in SketchUp and submit them that way, and both of those classrooms were finalists for that award. And I think overall the biggest change that we're seeing, because all of our students are given an email address, they have an online identity that teachers can identify back to who that email address belongs to, which is opening our teachers to be more accepting of going out and using other tools out there, things like wikis and Nings and other tools that are on the web that they'll foray into those and see if they can work in their classroom to help them achieve their goals, because they always know who they're inviting in is one of our students, and they can lock down those communities to certain classrooms or groups of students, and they're, I think, much more open to looking for the other tools that are out there, even beyond the Google tools, because they have that Gmail address. So overall, you know, these were some instructional lessons. You see we have some great lessons. We have some great tools that Google gives us, and once again for free, which is awesome. And when you blend those lessons and those tools together with great teachers that we have here, I think they make great music in the classroom. So that's all I had for you for the formal presentation. I think we're going to move into the Q&A session. I know Dana's been monitoring the Q&A on the side, and I think there's probably some moderator questions as well.
Dr. Thiele, thank you very much for joining us today. I think that was very informative. Some great examples of some great case studies, use cases of how teachers are using Google Apps for Education tools in their classrooms. So we have a couple questions. Dana's been monitoring some of the questions that are coming on the chat box, but we also have some questions that are coming in on the moderator. And I just wanted to let everyone who has joined us know that the presentation, that Dr. Thiele's presentation and case study, and the answers to some of the questions that we're not going to get to this morning will be posted, will be sent to you in a link if you've registered for the webinar. Okay, so I'm gonna go through some of these questions, Hank, and turn it over to you, and I'll add my thoughts on some of these if appropriate. The first question that we have from the group that was voted upon was, to set up class groups, do teachers have to enter the students in each of their classes, or is there a program that sets the separate classes as separate groups?
The way that we do it here is our student information system contains all of our students' email addresses. So our teachers go into the student information system and just grab that list for each individual class and then set up a contact group. I believe groups would allow you to do that at an administrator level. Jamie, maybe you can help me out on that one. But that's how we do it here.
Yes, so that's correct. You can set up the groups at the administrator level, but also you don't have to have that control. Teachers can actually set up their own groups as well.
Correct.
Right. Okay, so second question is, are there any security features built in the email system, or is that an option? What happens in the event of a student sending inappropriate communications? Obviously, I have an answer for that, but I'd like to hear how you guys handle that.
Okay, well, each school will probably have different policies about that. Our policy here is technology is a tool just like paper and pencil is, just like the phone is. The computer is no different than any of those. So we deal with those issues as they come up. We have an acceptable use policy that talks about how we deal with those. So cyberbullying or any of those we would handle via email, just like it would happen if it was paper and pencil or somebody putting something on a wall or anything like that. So we don't monitor for those things happening, but as they do, we treat them as discipline actions, not technology issues.
Okay, and I would just want to add that as part of the Google Apps for Education package, one of the things that K through 12 school districts or schools get for free is the Google Message Security, which provides provides schools the ability to filter for keywords and to do the security things that they need to do at the appropriate level. But with you, as you mentioned, Dr. Thiele, the concept of acceptable use policy, every school district is different. Everyone has a different way to set that up. So we try to provide as much as the technology tools that enable some of those policies to be enforced. But at the end of the day, it's we can't technologize policy features.
Right. I mean, if we wanted to, we could go in there, like you said, using message security, which anybody who signs up for now gets, I guess for a limited time here. We could go in there and set those policies where if something was said or a phrase was said that somebody was alerted, but we choose not to do that at this time.
Okay. The next question, and actually I don't know the answer to this, so I'm looking forward to hearing what the answer is. Do you have the chat feature, Google Talk, enabled for students? If so, in what ways has it enhanced or hindered learning? Do you have any tips for teachers, appropriate, effective use of student chat?
We actually have chat on for our staff. Our students are in separate domains, so we control theirs differently. We don't have it on yet for students. We're in a discussion currently of whether or not we're going to turn that on. I'm assuming that the same questions they have are the same ones we have. We're probably, at this point, I think there's more people leaning towards turning it on than off. But for those of you that are familiar with how the domains work currently, you can set up options where people can communicate or use any of these tools either on or off, can use them or not use them. So like turning chat on or off, where we currently have it off. You have the next layer where you could turn it on only for people within the domain, could only work within that domain, or they could work with the world. With us separating the 4 domains, we have one for all Maine 207 staff, and then one for the students in each of the buildings. It kind of limits us to it's either off or it's on to the world, because on within a single domain doesn't allow students to share with teachers. So we're kind of at the point where we realize if we turn on chat, we're allowing our students to chat with the world, and we feel that we need to do some preparation with our students next year to get them ready for that. So we're still building that curriculum for how we're going to give our students the skills to use that as an appropriate tool. And then once we feel that we've done that, we'll turn it on.
Okay, thanks. And I think that another one of the top questions that was asked was, are your students and staff on the same domain? So I think we covered that question as well. I just want to let everyone know who's following the questions. We covered the question of being able to, whether or not you had the students and staff on the same domain.
No, we have them we have them on separate domains.
Right.
I see a couple of questions about why you would, or do you do that, or why would you do that?
Right.
Our major reason for that is our students' email addresses are then different from our staff, which prevents a student from impersonating as a staff member, or a staff member for impersonating themselves as a student.
Okay. The next question here is, our staff currently is dependent upon our internal address book. Do you find that Google Apps contacts are an acceptable alternative?
I'm sorry, for what kind of address book?
So the question is that they're using an internal address book, and they want to know, and obviously we don't know what that address
Yeah.
book is like. So really the question is, are you using Google Apps contacts?
As our internal address book, yes.
Yes.
And then they have the ability to build their own address books, of course. But yes, initially all of our students have an address book of all the students in their school, and all of the staff have an address book of all of the staff.
Right, and I want to, the Google perspective on this, I just want to remind everyone that, we run Google using these same tools. So we run our corporation, our company, using the same tools. So we use Gmail as our email system. We use Contacts as our address book. We use, Calendar as our calendaring system. So I just want to remind everyone that, we internally we like to call it, we eat our own dog food. So for anything that you find in terms of issues or new features or feature requests or things that are coming up, we have a bunch of engineers that are just as interested in working on those feature requests. All right, another question for you, Dr. Thiele. Do you have sites and groups open for staff and student creation? How are you handling cleanup of defunct site groups, monitoring for inappropriate groups and sites?
We do have it open, but we don't actively monitor for that. When a staff member has an active account, if they're an active staff member with us, it is their responsibility to maintain their sites and their groups. When a staff member leaves the organization, then we take down anything that they have created. Before they leave, if it's something that's essential, we hope that they will share it with somebody else before they head on out. If not, whoever picks up for that person is starting over with their own site for that. We don't use sites as an add-on to our content management system. We have a formal content management system as well, but we allow teachers to use not only sites, but if there's other web-based products, like I mentioned before, wikis or Nings or any of the other tools that are out there, we don't limit them from what they can use. Our goal is to have them communicating with their students and parents as much as they can in whichever way they're comfortable. And things that are inappropriate, we handle those as we discover them, just as anything else that's here. It's very difficult for an organization of our size to prevent people from doing something that's inappropriate. We have policies about how we address that. We expect our teachers to be professionals, and generally they are. And our students are very professional with the technology we give them. We've had a history of email here. Before we had Gmail, we had another email product. We've had students with emails here for nearly 10 years, and we have experienced very limited problems with that for the entire lifespan of email for students here.
Okay, the next question was, you mentioned that you had your teachers and students on separate domains. How is it that you manage, or how do you manage your shared contacts? How is it that you can share contacts across those domains?
We don't share contacts across those domains. So students' information is contained in an LDAP lookup where they can look, we have a different address book outside of the contacts because those domains are separate.
Right.
Or if they need to get that information, they get it out of our student information system.
Okay. There was another question in here when I was going through the questions that I want to answer, which was, why is Google doing this? What's in it for Google? Why is Google doing this for free? And I just want to remind everyone that Google Apps for Education includes all the tools that Dr. Thiele was talking about regarding Gmail, Google IM or Google Talk, Calendar, Docs, Sites, Video, all these different tools and applications that you can turn on and turn off at your discretion. All these tools are available for free with no ads. We have some questions that are related to that on our website around, what do you do with our data and privacy and all the other concerns. We address those concerns for you on our website. We don't mine your data. We're not using your data for marketing purposes. The reason that we're doing this for free, there's two answers to that. The first one is that, quite frankly, we're trying to build a business and we're trying to get our the future users, if you will. So we're building a business for life, and we want to be able to provide these tools to students because we want them using our tools, and we want them graduating high school and going into college and going into the world, familiar with our tools. That's what's in it for us. The other reason that we do this is because we don't do a lot of corporate sponsorship types of events. We don't sponsor 10K runs. We don't provide those types of funding resources. What we do is we provide tools for free, especially for education, especially for nonprofits. So it's not just the Google Apps tools that are available to teachers for free. Most of our tools are available at either a discount rate or free to teachers, and including Google Earth and all the different things that you can do with Google Maps and all the other Google tools that you have. And the same is true for nonprofits. It's our way of, if you will, if you allow me to say, being good corporate citizens. So I just wanted to answer that question for anyone that's on the call that might be a little skeptical as to why we're actually doing this. Okay.
I also, Jamie, let me build off of that. I want to encourage anybody who is thinking of signing up for Google Apps EDU that haven't already, to go and look for the Google Apps Education Users Agreement. If you're a school district interested in getting started, will answer a lot of these questions. And I believe there's also an FAQ document out there on common questions that schools ask. Those two together answer a lot of the questions schools have when they get started with this.
Yes, thanks for that reminder. That's true. The Google Apps for Education agreement is a completely separate agreement and not at all like the consumer Gmail agreement that's out there. So make sure that if you're reviewing the agreements and what you think we do with data, make sure you're reviewing the correct agreement, and it's the Google Apps for Education agreement. So the next question for you, Hank, is for a district your size, what was the bandwidth implications? How can we reasonably ensure adequate performance?
Well, for a school our size, we have invested greatly in bandwidth. We were initially at 20 meg, and we do have YouTube wide open. So when you look at what's being used resource-wise, the majority of our bandwidth, like 90% of it, goes to YouTube. The other 10% is the other applications that are running through here. The majority of the Google applications do not seem to use up a lot of bandwidth resources. If we were to shut off YouTube, we would have adequate bandwidth. We believe that YouTube, though, is a valuable educational resource for our students and staff, so we continue to leave that open. We started a couple years ago with 20 meg for the 3 schools. We have nearly 9,000 people working here during the day with students and staff. We upgraded that. That was not enough. We upgraded to 40, and that was enough for everything to work, but to work slowly. We were able to renegotiate to repurchase services this year, and we actually have 100 in now for less than we were paying for 40. So bandwidth is getting cheaper. To us, we would rather throw the money at bandwidth that allows access to a lot of tools out there on the web, like the Google tools and other free tools, rather than invest on tools that we host and then have to maintain. So our philosophy is get as much stuff as we can from the web, from the cloud, and spend the money on bandwidth rather than spend the money on servers.
Okay, so the next question for you, Dr. Thiele, is this one. Let's go down to skip that one because we just answered that one. So a question around syncing. So we are working on directory sync with our Active Directory system. We can't seem to get password changes synced over. How did you deal with this issue?
We got a third-party company involved. Do you guys mind if I mention the third party?
No, absolutely.
Okay, we were working with a company called SADA Systems, S-A-D-A, and we paid them a little bit of money up front to, we're actually on Novell eDirectory, which makes it even more fun to sync. But they were able to work with Google's APIs and to integrate a single sign-on. So our staff and our students all go to one page, and their same credentials to get in to any computer in the organization, to any of our other applications. all are the same passwords that they use to get into Google. So it was a little bit of money up front to do all of those hooks and to build all that programming. I don't have the programming staff here to do it, but also in the process they integrated to the point where when we on the network end, on our internal side, when we create users, when we delete users, that's passed all the way across to Google. So there's no more extra steps in maintaining the Google user accounts. It's just like maintaining any of our user accounts. It just happens all at once.
Okay, next question for you is: do you find that the storage provided is enough? Have you developed, or do you think you need to develop a strategy for keeping it clean?
Well, storage of docs and sites and all of that, we have had no problems with. Our internal network storage, we're constantly fighting with that. We don't have enough for our staff and our students. So we are looking at other net storage applications out there. Some of those are available through the Google Marketplace now that will seamlessly integrate with Google Apps. So we are looking at other options that are out there. We're treating the gig of storage that Google gives our staff and students as kind of a cloud flash drive or jump drive. We still provide limited network storage to our students and staff, but it's not enough to offer them what they need to work nowadays, and that's just really expensive. So we're looking at what other options might be out there through other providers, but that's something we're still investigating.
Okay, the next question, a general question around what was your main purpose for switching to Google Apps, and what were the pros and cons that you faced at the beginning, and how would you and I'm adding this part of the question, how would you look at it now? What have you learned from the whole process?
Sure. The reason we started was, I mentioned for a bunch of years we had an email system for our students. That email system, when I came on board here in 2007, was very outdated. It was text-based. It was cumbersome to use. Our students didn't like to use it. Our teachers didn't like to email student stuff on it because you couldn't email hyperlinks. You couldn't do anything a modern email system could do. So one of the first things I was challenged with when I came through the door here was we needed to replace our students' email system. And I went out to all the usual suspects out there that provide email accounts for students and got quotes, and it was looking like it was going to cost about $35,000 a year for just student email. And we started talking about, well, why are we going to spend $35,000 a year on this when Google will give us the same product for our kids for free? And there was really no reason why not to go with Google. It did everything all the other companies did, and it came at no cost. Plus, we got the added benefit of we flipped on documents at that time for our students. So we have a wide variety of demographics here. So for some of our students, that was a way to be able to go to the library and work on their documents because they had somewhere to type a paper. So that was kind of like a bonus. And very soon, our teachers started to realize that the student email was better than their email, and the students had more tools at their disposal than the teachers did. So the next year, we turned on documents and all of the other apps for our teachers, except for mail. We stayed with GroupWise was our email service. And then this month, actually, we're in the throes of it this week. We are migrating over from GroupWise to Gmail, and we are at this point about 85% of the way through that. So by next Monday, we will be 100% Google.
Just to follow up on that, there's another question in here around how long did your rollout take, including the training features, and what did training look like for you?
Well, for students, we we made all of their accounts and had it up and running, including sign up and everything else, within 3 weeks. For them, we put instructions on the website of how they could log into their accounts, and then they got help in their English classrooms for those that needed some one-on-one attention. And then we have slowly rolled out these other applications to our teachers, and a lot of the teachers have just picked up and run with it. We have done some staff development with it. For the Gmail migration, we've done extensive staff development because that's such an essential tool for communication. But a lot of it has been, hey, we're going to offer these sessions, and please drop in, and it's kind of the lunch and learn or before school type of staff development. We do have some embedded staff development into Institute Days and some programs, like we have one that's called iTech, where we actually pull teachers out of classrooms and give them some staff development, and then they learn and become trainers to go back and use kind of train the trainer model. So those are the variety of things that we use.
Okay, I'm going to try to sneak a couple more questions in here. The first one I'm going to answer here, which is I've registered our school district for the service, but our domain has been put in the free standard edition of Google Apps. How long will it be changed to the K-12 edition? So I just want everyone to know, if when you go in and sign up for Google Apps for Education, you get the standard edition that you have to verify that you're an EDU, and you go through this process, and then we flip it over to an EDU account. That process takes 2 to 3 weeks, just because of the number of schools that we have signing on and their verification process that we have to go through. So we appreciate your patience as you go through that process, but just know that if you've applied for a Google Apps for Education domain, it's in our system. We're turning them over. You can continue to use, you can play with the features in the standard edition, but we will get you that EDU edition. Just wanted to add that thought there. The next question is one of my favorite questions that we have on the list today, which is the question I get a lot when I go out and talk about Google Apps for Education, which is, what kind of hardware recommendations do you have? Can you recommend specific PC manufacturers or that are best for the Google Apps experience? Low cost and durability, is iPad an option? And all the questions around hardware. And obviously I have my thoughts, but Hank, I'll let you answer the question first.
We have really, our standard platform here is Windows. However, we have a variety of computers scattered throughout the school, including Mac, including Linux netbooks, and it seems to work fine on all of those. I think that it probably works best in the Chrome browser. The feedback I get from staff and from students is that the products run a little bit faster in that browser, but it will run in all of the browsers, and it runs just fine. We have students and staff with all different ages and types of computers at home, and I don't hear any complaints about it not working anywhere. So to me, it's pretty much browser and operating system agnostic. It'll work wherever you want to try to run it. All you got to be able to do is get to the web.
Yeah, and I'll add my thoughts to that. I did a workshop back in Phoenix for my daughter's teachers, and the tech director that was setting the whole thing up, she said, half the teachers had PCs and half the teachers had Macs, whether or not, where we did the workshop, whether or not that would be a problem, and whether or not she needed to go out and get either the rest of the Macs or the rest of the PCs, so that we can be consistent across the board with our PCs or Macs. And it was great to be able to tell her that, as you mentioned, Hank, that all we're looking for is a browser, and our Google Apps for Education works with most browsers, and so it doesn't necessarily it's not specific to any specific PC or Mac. So that's great. The second part of that answer is also that. If you look at Google Apps for Education today, and you think, and for those of you who are familiar with its features, you can look at Google Apps for Education today and think about, maybe if you've been following it for a couple years, think about what it looked like when we launched it a couple years ago, and some of the features that we've been able to implement in the last couple of years, and kind of where Google Apps for Education will be going in the future, and all the possibilities. And with all those changes and all those new features that are coming out, you just show up on Monday, and and it just shows up because it's a web-based application, and those features are there for you, and you can use them. All right, we're going to wrap up. I'd like to thank Dr. Thiele for joining us and all the cool things that they're doing at Maine Township School District. Joining us again for the second time, so we appreciate that. We want to let everyone know that if you've registered and provided us an email, and I think you have to register with an email, we're going to be sending you the slides, the case study, and then we're going to go through these questions and answer them, and so we'll be sending you the answers to the questions that we didn't get a chance to get through today. So, Dr. Thiele, Hank, I'd like to thank you again for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
No problem. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.